Oh, so you wish to learn the ancient and mysterious art of C4 Fu? Well, you have come to the right internet video. Okay, so a lot of people seem to have difficulty understanding how to play Light Assault, and my videos on the subject were out of date. So, for starters, don't sit on a roof padding your KD. If you sit there wanking, of course you're going to be useless. C4 Fu is about cost effectiveness in terms of time and nanites, and about mass destruction. So basic tricks of the trade. First off, while taking damage, shooting enemies, or damaging with grenades will cancel redeployment and instant action, applying C4 and killing things with it does not, allowing you to, once practiced, redeploy out of various situations once you've used your C4, and respawn to go kill more stuff more quickly. That's not to say you should do it all the time. Constant C4ing will cause a resource shortage, so hanging around to shoot infantry does have merit if additional destruction is not urgent, but if it is, this can allow you to rapidly remove large groups of tanks and the like. Next up is territory. Light assaults excel at traversing difficult terrain rapidly. Conversely, in areas where land is very open, or it wouldn't be optimal to go over things to reach a target, the light assault becomes progressively less useful depending on the circumstances. Prime locations for a light assault are areas that involve elevation and areas where height can be obtained rapidly, such as areas with jump pads. When defending an area with elevation advantage, or fighting in an area with jump pads, the drifter jets are often the best choice. At max rank, they'll give you about 30 seconds of uninterrupted flight, and if targets are below you, the vertical shortcomings won't be much of a problem. Since many areas with jump pads are high-value territories, fights around them are frequent, and conveniently this is also the easy way to get rid of aircraft. On that subject, I'm going to take a detour and include a few things about basic jump jet controls and the like, so feel free to skip a minute or two if you wish. I searched for light assault versus aircraft guides, and the only one I found was my own outdated guide from 2 years ago, and the other videos that involved light assaults killing aircraft were people bailing out of aircraft from high above and performing stunts. I consider taking a fighter or Valkyrie with the express intention of bailing out to C4 other aircraft to be a waste of nanites for a less efficient means of attacking the target, since it requires you to pull the aircraft, then travel searching for an opponent. This consumes additional time and resources, which is in contradiction to C4 Fu philosophy, now that C4 and aircraft resources are pooled. You can still put on a radar, find targets, and be effective, but it's not necessarily resource efficient. So under the impression most people don't know the cheap and fast way to kill aircraft as a light assault, let's go over that. You can combine drifters with jump pads to catapult yourself depending on how fast the jump pad is throwing you. With the exception of the Icarus, which strips forward momentum and moves better if you're moving sideways, the drifter and default jets currently have controls I would call a cross between a car and a helicopter. Using a side strafe key is basically pressing a brake key to slow you down while moving in a given direction, as if you were driving a car and slowing down to make a turn. To maintain speed, you'll usually want to turn and look in the direction you wish to go instead. This doesn't mean you shouldn't use side strafe keys, but they are situational, and if you turn while using your jump jet too quickly, you may freeze yourself in the air. It's all rather convoluted, so it really takes some practice to adjust to them. If you hold your forward movement key while turning and tapping the jump jet key, you can use a jump pad to precision catapult yourself a considerable distance, as demonstrated. It'll take some practice to get used to the controls and when to look where and press which keys, but you'll get the hang of it. Once practiced, this will allow you to rapidly circle biolabs, which makes you more dangerous to aircraft and allows you to rapidly perform precision drops against ground targets. When it comes to aircraft specifically, I feel the drifters are the best because the horizontal move speed they grant is substantial, and when attacking from a point of elevation or using a jump pad, both common scenarios, the drifter will create opportunities to reach aircraft where the Icarus, for example, would only allow you to reach one that happened to pass close enough. While the Icarus can capitalize on such an opportunity, the drifters and proper terrain type create them. I wouldn't say aircraft targets for light assault are as frequent as main battle tanks, but they're fairly common if you're in the right areas. Since proper use of the catapult requires you to not always look where you're going, it's helpful to spot your target and then increase the minimap, default bound to the H key, to guide yourself with it to either ground or air targets. See me bombing a tank in the background for a simple visual demonstration of this process. Now that we've gone over where and how to C4 aircraft, there is a hierarchy to aircraft targets. Let's go over it. Generally, Valkyries are best, followed by ESFs, followed by Galaxies and Liberators. When I made my previous guide, Liberators were the prime target, but that was when one C4 brick destroyed them. Nowadays, two won't in most cases. Valkyries and ESFs require one C4 to kill and can be put in a burning or destroyed state if a C4 that misses is detonated while falling close enough. Because they require only one, this allows the C4 to be detonated as soon as possible rather than having to plant another. This is important because of a C4 warping bug, which I will address in a minute. Valkyries are worth a solid 400 base XP. They're large, bulky, slow, fragile, and more likely to contain several people, and generally you're more likely to kill passengers in a Valkyrie than you are a Galaxy.
The Scythe is the easiest fighter to kill because they're larger, bulkier, and easier to land a C4 brick on, and in my experience also have a tendency to slow down and hover while trying to support ground troops, seemingly more often than mosquitoes and much more often than reavers. Killing the latter two is still doable, of course, but opportunities are less frequent. Liberators and Galaxies both require 2 C4 bricks to kill, and can only be killed if they're damaged to a round smoke or thick smoke respectively. For how durable and fast Liberators are, they only offer 500 base XP, equivalent to that of a main battle tank, and Galaxies only offer 400, equivalent to a Valkyrie. For the C4 you'd spend killing a Galaxy or Liberator, you'd likely get more certs pursuing MBTs. Singling out one that's sitting in the back alone and collecting an extreme menace bonus is usually better point gain than going after a more durable and evasive Liberator or Galaxy. Because Galaxies need to be reduced to around half health in order to kill with C4, they'll likely drop all their passengers before you can kill them, and since Galaxies come with built-in safe ejection, the crews have an annoying habit of bailing out before dying, resulting in few kills off most Galaxies, whereas you'd only spend 1 C4 brick and have more kills from Valkyries. If you're relatively new at killing aircraft, the cinematic feel of destroying Galaxies may incentivize you for a little while, but you'll start ignoring Galaxies and Liberators when Valkyries or tanks are around because they're just better certs for less C4. Now about that warping bug I mentioned. Most of the C4 bugs that existed in Planetside 2 when it released are still here over 2 years later, and I'm not aware of any public plan to fix them, so I have to treat them as game mechanics from a C4 foo perspective, and they influence how targets are dispatched. The most common is the warping bug. Any C4 brick, once planted on a vehicle, may warp back to the location it was about 3 seconds prior. I tested the frequency of this in the VR, and out of 20 bricks, 14 warp bugs occurred. Because I don't have time to test 1,000 bricks to pinpoint the exact percentage, we're going to go off the 20. The warp bug has approximately a 70% occurrence rate for each C4 brick. So if you plant 2 C4 on a vehicle, there's only about a 9% chance both will explode on target if it's still moving and doesn't hold still for a few seconds. This is also important to remember if you're, say, strapping C4 to a flash and detonating it next to a tank. This is another reason going after Liberators and Galaxies is under-rewarding. As aircraft, they're more prone to move farther than a tank, and thus the magic warp shield is more likely to kick in, whereas Valkyries and Fighters, requiring only 1, can be detonated shortly after being thrown, and thus even if the explosion warps back to its original planting location, the aircraft is more often still within blast radius. The various C4 bugs are pretty severe, and getting to an airborne Galaxy, C4ing it, and having the C4 warp and suicide you is probably one of the most annoying experiences in the game. Fortunately, the warp bug is not completely unmanageable in most situations. When bombing tanks, you often have the option of detonating 1 C4 if the tank starts to move, before they get out of the original blast zone. And if you're using drifters, you can sometimes outrun a tank that's backing away from you. To help in this case, it should be noted C4 is thrown in something of an arc, and will be thrown farther if you're aiming around 45-ish degrees up. A visual demonstration of C4 tossing is going on in the background to illustrate. This makes it easier to land C4 on tanks that are moving, and C4 that is landed further back gives you a little extra time to detonate the C4 before the warp bug moves it out of blast range. With a little practice, you'll negate the warp bug most of the time. Unfortunately, you can do little about the other C4 bugs. C4 may vanish into nothingness even if the target hasn't moved. Also, the explosion effect of C4 may continue falling even if the C4 landed on something, and can fall through floors, entire buildings, and the map. So you can readily encounter this situation.
Well, Mr. Starker, I think you have underestimated me and the element of surprise!
These bugs still occur often, but they're not as common as the warp bug. As an addendum to drifter controls, it should be noted they slowly lift you if you're not holding a directional move key while using them, and slowly push you in the direction you're facing. They also don't immediately cancel forward momentum if you switch to going upward, and each jump jet can super jet up elevators if you spin to avoid falling out. Additionally, when you jump normally into drifters, you maintain some of the upward momentum for a couple seconds, so jumping onto crates or rocks can help you get onto rooftops faster when using them for more standard jump jet tasks. Because drifters offer significant horizontal speed, you can use them to skate around tanks and swerve from side to side to dodge shells, though drifters can sometimes get caught on the odd slanted texture and require you to jump to avoid stalling if skating across the ground. Because of the increased evasion, easier compensation for the warp bug, and capitalization on altitude advantages, I personally feel drifters are currently the most versatile jump jet. On the subject of tanks, let's talk about ground targets. The best way to kill tanks is usually dropping C4 from above, as this allows you to avoid being seen by the tank's first or third person view, though rushing in from the side with a drifter has merit against tanks that can't escape quickly or are distracted. In live battle conditions, most tanks will die in 1 C4 brick if you see them smoking. A Vanguard shield will absorb enough damage to keep the tank alive through 2 C4 bricks if at full health, but if it's smoking, 2 will still kill it. However, the shield lasts about 6 seconds, which is plenty of time for the tank to move enough to trigger Warp Bug magic protection, as well as grant much more time for the Light Assault to be killed. Mag Riders are evasive due to their speed boost ability, and also tend to side strafe when bombarding a base from range, granting more safety from C4 dropped from high above. The Prowler is possibly the easiest vehicle to C4 in the game. Their lockdown freezes them in place, has no defense bonus, and they're bulkier than the Vanguard and Lightning without the evasion of the Mag Rider. Also, it seems their increased bulkiness gives off a larger secondary explosion when destroyed, making them more dangerous to nearby friendlies. I'm not sure about the exact nature of this, but I often observe when C4ing 2 tanks at once, the Prowler seems to distinctly cause more damage to those near it than a Vanguard, and secure kills I'm not sure would have happened were my targets Vanguards or Lightnings. Dropping in from above is also the usual way to kill 2 tanks at once, as this requires more precision, and is even more vulnerable to failure if one or both tanks move, or one or both notice you rushing in from the side. Though if they're tunnel vision shelling a base, you may still be very successful at that. You don't want to drop C4 from too high, as tanks may move while your C4 is falling, so it's often beneficial to drop down closer and throw your C4 from a lower altitude, though circumstances will vary. Since if you attack from above and can throw C4 from outside the third-person view of the target, this is also the best way to attack aircraft, since many pilots fly in third person, and it's one of the reasons fighting in territories that offer jump pads or elevation advantages are so beneficial for C4 Fu. And this brings up the difference between tactics and strategy. I mentioned high-value territory earlier. If you're in the middle of an alert, certain territories can be beneficial to hold as a way of gridlocking the opposition, like a biolab. If you're in one of these areas where you have a terrain advantage, and the enemy has, say, a dozen tanks hanging around, you can potentially wipe out many targets on your own, and significantly contribute to holding a particular base. Keep in mind, the entire Light Assault special ability is mobility. The whole point is to put yourself in an advantageous environment, and use it as a strategic asset. If an alert is going on, you should probably be in one of these high-value, LA-favored locations to contribute to the victory of the alert, rather than mucking about in an otherwise unimportant area where you'd be less effective. There are, of course, times where this won't be the case, and a light assault can still capitalize on walls and buildings for something meaningful, such as C4ing Esamir guard towers in the many walled bases on the map. Now, on the subject of infantry and max units, while infantry die very easily to C4, I don't generally use C4 as an anti-infantry tool, because it's not very resource efficient. Infantry cost respawn time, vehicles cost that plus nanites. It can be worthwhile to eliminate clumps of infantry, but it's not always meaningful. Besides, infantry come for free when you kill important sunderers or tanks, like plastic toys found in a cereal box. So that's a rule of thumb against infantry. Mileage may vary on value. Max units are not favorable targets, considering they may invest in flak armor and survive a C4 hit, they can charge and evade before you detonate, and they can be revived, whereas a tank is destroyed and it's gone. There is value in killing them, but it's less consistent than vehicle destruction and also offers less points. But if you wish to kill max units, the best thing to do is usually bait them into chasing you, or start shooting at them from behind cover and attract them to come around. That or toss C4 over cover. The worst thing to happen is you toss the C4 and land in a good spot, but die before you can press the button. The same tends to apply for harassers. They're prone to move a lot, but they die in one C4, and sometimes you'll catch a couple people repairing or driving through a choke point, or sitting still in an area they shouldn't be. As a side note, if you wish to guard a point with C4, I find it beneficial to plant them on the ceiling, as they're almost never noticed, and grenades that are thrown in the room usually don't detonate them. Then just wait for it to be contested. While the explosion rarely kills people, it's a good way to spread damage out and drop everyone on the point to around half health, and then roll in with any weapon and kill them all. A grenade can also be helpful, as people that are damaged more often run from grenades, making them easier targets. However, I would advise Nanoweave over the Grenade Bandolier for this, as grenades plus C4 for infantry will make your resources vanish. Personally, I feel Nanoweave is the most versatile suit slot item for a light assault. Flak armor I view as training wheels. Once you're practiced with a jump jet, you'll rarely die to trip mines, and if you're using drifters, you can just zoom past them and reliably survive. And if you're C4ing ground vehicles, especially sunderers, it's much more likely random infantry will see you and start shooting at you than for you to die to tank shells. While in close quarters, Nanoweave may only buy you 1 or 2 extra bullets, damage decays at range. If you're being shot from 30 to 40 yards away from the one guy who noticed you, that number increases meaningfully. It also helps you shrug off shots from Spitfire turrets, and often safely ignore them when destroying a tank, though it may be prudent to take the turret out with a grenade or bullets, lest they act as an alarm. Flak armor will help you survive trip mines, and it'll help when you accidentally detonate C4 and are too close and would kill yourself, but as you become experienced, these issues are self-correcting. There are, of course, playstyles and situations which may merit the use of flak armor, or extra ammo, or whatever it is you're using, but for the average C4 Fu practitioner, I'd say Nanoweave offers the most. Not so much that the 1000 Cert Rank 5 should be prioritized over other important things like rail attachments, C4, or jump jet upgrades, though. Implants are kind of the same, and if you want a non-support role to avoid using implant energy on, the Light Assault is a solid option. All implants have value, but none are particularly useful for C4FU once you know what you're doing. The explosive detector can be helpful if you're new and still stepping on them more than you should. The safe fall implant can be helpful as you learn to operate jump jets, or when using the Icarus, and enhanced targeting can help a bit when picking at infantry or deciding when to C4 a max, but vehicle smoke essentially provides enhanced targeting for free, as do maxes shouting that they need repairs. Let's move on to Sunderers. A practitioner of C4FU looks at a Sunderer like a vulture looks at a dying animal. Remember when I mentioned smoking vehicles earlier? When a vehicle is damaged a little, it starts smoking. The smoke becomes darker and thicker at around half health. In live battle conditions, this usually means you can find a Sunderer and gauge how many C4 bricks it will take to kill it with reasonable accuracy. Most of the time, a smoking Sundee dies in 2 C4. A thick smoke Sundee dies in 1. However, they have a habit of being repaired if they're important, and it should be noted that since deployed Sundees are less liable to move, tossing C4 near it to damage it is more viable than it would be for other vehicles. Accordingly, when one is being attacked by your team, you should try and get your C4 on the ground near it so you can kill the people repairing, so you doom it to your teammates if your C4 doesn't kill it outright. While 2 C4 won't kill a full health Sundee alone, there are several methods to get rid of them. For a light assault, you have the option of planting C4 on top of the Sunderer, resupplying, and coming back. Don't redeploy to do this, or throw down more than 2 bricks at a time. That destroys your C4. It's best to plant 1 C4, then come back with 2 to mitigate the risk of losing resources if you get shot in transit. Unless you're targeting 2 Sundees, because then you need to apply both, so it only takes 3 trips to destroy both instead of 4. An upgraded blockade armor Sunderer requires 4 C4 total, so 2 trips of 2 bricks. When soloing in this manner, it's best to plant the initial C4 on top of the Sundee so they're less likely to be noticed and destroyed by an enemy, and as per normal, if you can do this from high up using drifters, especially combined with jump pads, you can precision drop and resupply quickly. On the note of precision drops, the minimap is your waifu. It wants you to be happy, it wants you to have certs. While throwing C4 ahead will progressively move forwards if dropped from high up, if you spot the target or put a waypoint on the Sunderer, you can hover directly above on the minimap and drop them while facing down, and the C4 will usually arrive on point even from 100 plus meters in the air. Since deployed Sunderers aren't likely to move, this is a safer method of delivering C4, and doesn't require the altitude drop a tank might need. Usually the only tanks you'd want to drop C4 from very high up on will generally be ones using infantry radar. They have a visual indicator as a big dish for mag riders and a spinning NS bar for other tanks. But since tank radar doesn't reveal your position to their entire team, you can just murder their friendly tanks nearby instead. Tanks are often hesitant to fire on friendly tanks, or if they do so and try to kill you, they may actually distract the vehicle you're about to destroy, so don't be afraid to use another tank as cover. You may even be able to get one to hit another and damage it enough to kill with 1 C4 brick if you're lucky. There's also the fact that anti-infantry radar seems to be very rarely used, though that may just be my experience. And on the note of vehicle defenses, let's talk about deployment shield Sunderers. The DS Sundee has had an exploit for at least 6 months, where it can be given instant shield regeneration applying permanent shield resistance values, giving a DS Sundee about double the sustained damage resistance values of a fully upgraded blockade armor Sundee with extra protection against mines. Since this makes blockade armor useless for anything but reaching the deployment spot, and provides superior to fully leveled deployment shield bonuses to ones at level 2, I have to conclude it's not intended, so I'm going to tell you how to beat it. The exploit is triggered by a medic placing a shield recharger underneath a DS Sundee. While this is easy to produce, it's also easy to eliminate by killing the shield regen device, and since they're fragile, this can be done with a C4 brick landing on the ground nearby instead of being directly applied to the Sundee, and they'll also die from frag grenades or bullets. Properly killing a deployment shield Sunderer requires more than just C4 from a light assault, because on an upgraded shield, your 2 C4 will break the shield but won't damage the vehicle, meaning with 2 trips it still will only start burning. If you damage the shield with 6 to 8 explosive crossbow bolts, depending on how far away you are, you'll damage the shield enough for 2 C4 to cause enough for the next 2 to kill it, with additional bolts to further whittle the shield down, if desired, to reduce the window an engineer has to repair. However, a crossbow isn't an absolute necessity. While this method does let you solo kill a Sundee without giving them the time to repair once the shield drops, of simply using 4C4, if the Sundee is not well guarded, you can kill it more cheaply as an engineer, heavy assault, or with a harasser with an AV weapon. And if it is well defended, then odds are there's a fight going on, and as a light assault you can sit 60 yards away in a tree and spot it to draw the attention of a passing fighter or some such, or if necessary, call out its location in region chat and see if you can attract a rocket or two, and you'll usually be successful in killing it anyway. Another note is that as a light assault, you may be team-killed rather frequently. You're often in locations prone to be bombarded. Fortunately, however, this isn't all that disruptive, as chances are, once you've entered such a danger zone, you've usually destroyed the target your teammates are trying to kill by the time you get team-killed. But it is important to remember that C4FU isn't about kill-to-death ratio, it's about rapid mass destruction of assets. tanks, sunderers, etc. And as one final note, if you become proficient with destroying said assets, you may occasionally receive colorful private messages. Fortunately, the game has an ignore feature now, accessible by right-clicking said whiners in your chat log. The art of C4 Fu is not stopped by the spammer. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with a haiku. As one practices, so his C4 Fu gains certs, and gains more upgrades. Thanks for watching, sow the art of C4 Fu among the battlefields, and I'll see you next time.